Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Here on Earth.
Hello and welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth, unless it's welcome back. Peter Robbins here, and we are going to go right into the show today. It is October. It is getting cold in this part of the country, and it's nice to be in a house with some heat, no question about it. Tonight's guest is also a show host, and one whose show I have been a guest on. That's how we became friends. For more than 30 years, Eric Mintel has been an acclaimed jazz musician with his group, the Eric Mintel Quintet. But most nights he investigates the paranormal. Eric was invited to perform twice at the White House, in 1998 at the request of President Clinton, and in 2011 for President Obama. He has also been invited to perform at the Kennedy Center on more than 10 occasions and did a special concert at the United Nations in 2010. He has toured all over the country with his group, played in concert halls, high schools, libraries, elementary schools, churches, jazz clubs, and many more venues. A consummate professional in front of the camera, he also has stories written up on his paranormal activities by numerous newspapers and has been featured on radio stations and podcasts across the country and around the world. Interested in the paranormal from a very young age, Eric has led Eric Mintel Investigates since 2016, seeking out strange stories to share with his audiences, be they about ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, or Dogman. Fans of his music have eagerly followed him into the paranormal world. On many investigations, Eric and his team have gotten groundbreaking footage and captured strange paranormal activity rarely seen before. Eric is home-based in Pennsylvania, and it is a pleasure to have him on the show tonight. Eric Mintel, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for being here. Pleasure to be here. I was looking forward to this, and so was E.T.
Yes, I was going to say, we don't usually have an actual extraterrestrial, even though they are often the subject of our shows, and will be partially tonight.
He was curious. He was curious how this was going to go. So yeah, I said, "Come on in. You can join us."
Easy to understand, and he is remaining very intent looking there, and I feel a little bit judged, so I'll be on my best behavior tonight. Eric, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was actually born in Plainfield, New Jersey, and that was 1967, and I just celebrated my 55th birthday last Saturday. Thank you. And so from there, we basically moved to Upper Black Eddy, which is more northern Bucks County here in Pennsylvania, and just have been a Bucks County in most of my life.
And can you tell us a bit about your folks?
Sure. My mother was a first grade school teacher for, I think she was teaching before I was even born. And she retired in 2003. So a little more than 40 years, she was a first grade teacher. First grade and I think kindergarten. So we designated her as a saint because the stuff that she was just had the patience like you wouldn't believe. But she was great, and that's what she did. She was just a educator. My father was not so much an educator. He was kind of a free spirit, and did a lot of different things over the years. And we never really had that great of a relationship, over the course of
Mm.
our relationship. He was always there for me, being an
Yeah.
only child, and but he was an alcoholic and
Ah,
just really struggled bad with that
yeah.
most of his life. And unfortunately, he passed in June of this year.
Oh,
And
my.
as it wasn't unexpected, it was just he was not doing good. He had lung cancer,
Oh,
50 years smoker as well. And yeah, so 3 packs of Marlboro a day for 50 years. That's 75 cigarettes a day. I don't know how this man just kept going. It was unbelievable. But he was 81, and but he had he was a character. I mean, I do have to say, as a jazz musician, he was one to sit at the piano and could make up his own melody and just sit there and improvise, and it would just come to him like that. And I would say that a lot of the paranormal stuff that I've heard as a child also came from my father. So he would always, be telling, stories about the paranormal events all going on throughout Bucks County. So that was a big part of my life
wow.
growing up.
Um, my condolences on his passing.
Thank
I
you.
know it was
Thank
just
you.
this summer. And I can relate a little bit to your mother in that I taught first grade for 5 years,
Wow.
but only art, as well as second and third grade, and several days a week at a private school in Brooklyn. But
Great.
what an experience working with a room full of 6-year-olds. It is transcendent. You walk out with your head spinning.
Yeah, I
And of
bet. I
course, if
bet.
there's, any kind of flu or cold going around, you are among the first to get it.
Oh,
Children are creatures who they have germs.
yes.
I've observed over the years. Um, Early on, was your dad's piano playing your first real musical memory, or like a lot of the rest of us, just keeping your ears open to the world in terms of pop music? What kind of music first captured your imagination?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and he would always be fond of saying this, that he would play. We were I was fortunate to have music in the household, which I always think music and the environment that you're in is
Yeah,
so important.
you bet.
And so we always had classical music. He always had something playing in the background, whether it be classical or jazz. He also played the organ as well. So he would play the organ while I would be in the little bassinet next to the organ. He would be playing, and I would be just hearing this probably just by osmosis and just being there. And he, so he would, but the I would say the first musics that I remember were like, the pop stuff of the day: Elton John, David Bowie, those, because I'm a product of the 70s. I was born in 67. So all of that great music that was happening then, I remember walking home with friends and I heard Someone Saved My Life Tonight blasting out the window, and those are memories. They were vivid memories of a
Yeah.
summer, where all of that great stuff was going on. And then, of course, I've had jazz influences too. Um, Dave Brubeck, Oscar Peterson, Chick Corea, all of these great, and then the
Great.
classical composers, Beethoven, Bach, Chopin. So everything was, it was an amalgamation of this wonderful music, and being an
Um,
only child, just absorbing everything I possibly could.
as let's say when you were in elementary school, and we all start to ponder as children, once we have the concept or our concept of what adulthood is going to be, what did you imagine or fantasize or dream about being when you grew up?
I wanted to be Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man.
Sounds right
I,
to me.
I said to my mother, I said, "Mom, I want my name to be changed to Steve Austin." Not the guy, not the Stone Cold Steve Austin, not that guy, Lee Majors. But that was, and your listeners will remember that. But that was me. I was Peter. I was in a world of, like, being an only child. I was in a
Yeah,
world of, like, fantasy.
yeah.
I loved all that creative stuff, and I was just like, that's what I wanted to be. It was so cool. I'd see that. That's what I wanted to do. Or if I was playing music, that's what I wanted to do. And so it's one of those things. It's just like, learning by watching. I was also put in front of the TV a lot too, because my mother was working and my father was not really there. So I was pretty much watching all those shows back in the 70s, and good television, but a lot of times I think a lot of my creativity comes from those times.
The cultural forces that shape us in the generation between me and you, a certain amount of it was definitely influenced by television,
Hmm.
besides the $6 Million Man. And that
Right.
doesn't really seem like a lot of money now, although it did
I
then.
know, right?
Um, the $100 million man, the
Yeah.
$1 billion man,
The
uh,
$600 million man now. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
What were some of the shows that had an impact on you that you really enjoyed?
Oh man. And to this day, I mean, plays shows like Columbo, McMillan and Wife, and all those McLeod, all those.
Solving mysteries.
Exactly. And even in my high school yearbook, Peter, I wanted to be a detective. It said detective career plans, but underneath it said jazz pianist career plans too. So I
Wow,
feel like I
they got
feel
them
like
both right.
I feel like both of them have been realized. I'm a paranormal detective
Yeah,
and a jazz man, and
very much so in both respects.
yeah, and it's just been it. That's a very no, it's another otherworldly thing going on that way too. Um,
Was it your father's influence in terms of being a pianist that got you to start playing the piano or studying the piano, or did that come separately?
well, the how this happened was I had been at the piano probably, I would say, like 4 or 5 years old. My parents could always find me at the piano with a very innate interest in the instrument, making these sounds, these keys making the sounds. And what is this
Yeah.
doing? And they would always find me there on at the piano. And then fast forward maybe to I was maybe 12, 13. I had been listening to like cartoon show themes. And I was playing like the Popeye theme or something like that. It was just all these things that I would listen to and transcribe to the piano, even though at the time I didn't know I was transcribing. I didn't even know that word. But the main epiphany happened when I was around 14, and I was going through my parents' record collection, and I looked in there and I came across this old 45 record, and it was it was the Dave Brubeck Quartet,
Oh no.
and Dave Brubeck's on there with his horn rimmed glasses, hair slicked back, his suit, and on one side of the album was Take Five. Yep, there he is, and the other side was Blue Rondo a la Turk.
Wow.
So I put the record on the record player at the time,
That's what they called them back then.
record player. And I'll tell you, Peter, I had that awakening, which was like, this is what I want to do. This is the music I want to play. And even though at the time I didn't know it was called jazz, that's how
Yep.
naive I was. But at that, I knew I wanted to play that.
For viewers and listeners who did not grow up anywhere between when you did and I did, um, when Dave Brubeck broke big with the quartet, it was massive. And the influence on pop music in general and jazz becoming part of the musical background of kids,
Yeah.
it was top 10 stuff. It was being played on the FM stations along with, the classics of rock. Well, we didn't call them classics then. They were simply the songs that were being played.
Yeah.
But that song was emblematic. I mean, it really became shorthand for the word jazz for
Yep.
a lot of people and probably brought millions of people into an interest in the subject. Um, at what point did you actually start to study piano, or did you study? Are you self-taught?
Yeah, after that, going back to Take Five, that was something like you had said. I remember Dave was talking to me, and he had said when we were on college campuses, when they would go by the dorm rooms, that's all they were playing, every single dorm room. It said that was the most wonderful time of his life. It was just like, having that hit. But yeah, I think after I found Dave Brubeck and I had that total interest in and learning everything I could about Dave Brubeck, got all of his records, listened to a lot of the records, got the music. I pretty much took a year's worth of piano lessons.
Wow.
And I wanted to get the basics down, but I was going to the lessons playing Blue Rondo and Take Five, but yet my piano teacher's trying to teach me Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So that wasn't working. So so I always say I'm a product of reverse engineering. So
well said.
So he had said to me, he's like, look, I can't teach you any further than what you already know. You're going to have to go your own way. So Peter, mostly I'm self-taught. Yeah. Self-taught. And
the thing of being a young person and finding an heroic figure to inspire you to move forward and follow a dream is one thing. To actually meet that person is another thing. To hear them live is another thing. But to connect deeply, to have them as a mentor, as a friend, is in a whole class by itself. What were the circumstances under which you, as a huge Dave Brubeck fan? And let's also remember that Dave was a struggling musician in the early 50s. In fact, in promoting this show, I had a response from a Facebook friend saying, in 1953, Brubeck played My Small Town at the local theater. Almost nobody came. Nobody had ever heard of him. And it was a very small audience, and we were amazed. It was a wonderful experience. It was so intimate. And of course, it was, years before he went on to become a huge international star and icon of this kind of music. What were the circumstances that you made that path from being a fan to hearing him for the first time, to meeting him, to becoming somebody who was a mentor?
It was amazing. I mean, let's see, I think it was about 1990. I went to a concert of his down in my area at the Keswick Theater. It's a beautiful old theater. And Dave Brubeck was playing. And I said, I've got to go see him. I've got to see my hero here. Yeah. And got a chance to see the concert, was just amazed, just blown away, and went backstage. And I had a couple of tapes with me that I had made of some music. And I met him and I said, I'm a huge fan. And, I made some music for you. And this is some of the stuff that I'm doing. And one thing led to another, that year after year, I would go see him. From that point on, I would try to go to see him. And then it got to the point where he was writing me, and he was writing me saying, you're playing my music better than I play it.
Oh my God.
Which was phenomenal. I mean, just in itself was amazing. And I mean, that's the kind of guy Dave was. Very, very humble. And you're talking about how he communicated his music. His music communicated on a different type of level. People could understand that. It was very melodic, and that's what I am now. I'm more of a melodic player. And that's one of the things, like I always say, Dave, I learned a lot of life lessons from Dave, not just the music, but the life lessons of work ethic, family man, and that kind of thing. And he was pretty much a straight arrow in the community, and people loved Dave. They loved his music, but they loved the man. And that was the beautiful thing.
Something you just said really resonates as a mark of character. I remember years ago, a very wise person I knew saying, for me, the best way in life to become powerful is to give power to everyone around you. And for me, that translated into attention, kindness, and encouragement. I think about my mentors in the world of UFO studies, starting with several whose names are kind of lost to UFO history. to Bud Hopkins and Stanton Friedman, Timothy Good, who, perfect example, writing him as kind of hero worshiping shortly after I read Above Top Secret, his seminal book from 1987. And, being in New York City, Tim in London, always not just responding, but writing me back on his beautiful stationery with raised print.
Yep.
And always signing it with a fountain pen and always being encouraging. And when we finally got to meet on an early trip to the UK to research the Rendlesham story, at the last minute, he had to cancel out. He said, I'm a violinist. I work with the London Philharmonic and I've got session work and I can't turn it down. And a day before, he contacted me in London and said, I've worked something out. I want you to meet me. And, where I met him was Abbey Road Studio.
Oh, wow.
And he had me wait in the commissary. It turned out at the table that the Beatles used to have tea at during breaks in the early 60s. I met George Martin that day.
Wow.
And he took me and my writing partner into, I think it was Studio 7, which is the largest studio there, and the one that became quite famous where they recorded All You Need Is Love.
Oh,
and it was a 50-piece orchestra scoring a film for the Spanish market, where the first thing I noticed was their music stands all had monitors built into them right below the pages, so they could see where they were in the film. And there was a couch. And for 40 minutes, they performed for the two of us. And then we met, but always encouraging, always, what you just said right there, for him to say, even if it was taking a personal liberty to say, you play better than I do on my music, that's a life-changing thing to say to a young musician.
No doubt.
It's just, there you go. I mean, that moment will resonate with you for the rest of your life, and says a lot about his generosity of spirit, his way to encourage you, and to know that you matter. That's remarkable.
And I thank you for that. Thank you for looking at it that way, because that's exactly what it was. And and I always say that it's a shame, because the kids today do not have really great mentors to latch onto. Like, maybe some here and there, but more, because everything is more like in the media, right? So you've got more sports in the media, you've got all these other things, but more like arts oriented stuff. And I wouldn't even say the music of today is like even music, but it's more like where I was growing up and having that music really spoke to me. And then I, as an investigator, I'm trying to find out, well, how is that music coming through him to communicate that to me? And I guess that's why it gave me such a great connection with him. And so much so, Peter, I'll have to send you a picture. In 1983, in art class in high school, I made a bust of Dave Brubeck. It's like, and I showed the Brubeck family. They're like, my God, that looks like Dave. And
another great compliment.
And I'm like, what, 14, 15 at that point. So that's how much this man really spoke to me, and look, maybe I was also looking at him like a father figure too.
That's very possible.
And probably
for all the
was.
reasons we understand.
Yeah. And I could admit that. I could definitely admit that. But it was just great to have him and his wife, Iola. They were very, very great people. And she was always like, if Dave couldn't write me, it would be Iola that would write.
Oh, my gosh.
And then later on, when they got a little more adept at emails, they would send me an email. But I have letters from them. I've got handwritten notes, like literally notation from Dave, saying, like for Christmas cards and things like that. And he wrote lyrics to one of his songs and wrote it in notation in this Christmas card. So it was just amazing. Just a really treasure to have.
For any of our viewers, I don't want to take for granted that, it's understood that any guest that I have on, you're aware of everything, that they do and say and things.
Sure.
If that name does not ring a bell for you, simply Google Dave Brubeck, Take 5. And if it doesn't jangle a nerve, you will immediately hear one of the great iconic jazz riffs of all time, of
In
all
five
time.
four, in 5/4 time.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly. Um, at what point did you go from being somebody who loved music, was, really inspired by this particular musician, to saying, I think this is what I want to do? And how do I start to perform? How do I start to be a performer? What were your first gigs? How did you get them?
My God, it was just it was all grassroots effort. I would basically, so trying to think now. So this is about 1993 was my very first uh, group that I had together, and that was and I had it. It started as a quintet. I had 5 people in it. There was a guitar player that was only with me for a couple of gigs, and then we let him go. And I just went to a quartet because that's what I liked, that particular configuration.
Yeah.
So I went to, I believe it was a jam session of musicians in my local area here in Doylestown, down the street. And I had walked in, and these guys were playing, and I sat and I played Take 5 and a couple of things, and it was great. We were all interacting, and the connection was great. And I had approached them. They were all going to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and I had said, I want to start, and maybe a couple of months prior to this, I wanted to start a band. So I said to them, I'd like to do a band. I'd like to start a band and do, a tribute to Dave Brubeck. And they said, fine, let's do it. That'd be cool. So we would rehearse every Saturday morning down in Philadelphia at the University of the Arts. And this was maybe about September. So September, October, November 12th of 1993 was my very first concert. And we had a concert at this local college. It was Delaware Valley College. And it was a tribute to Dave Brubeck. The newspapers did a great story on it. About 400 people showed up.
Whoa.
It was for my very first concert. The place was packed to the rafters. After that gig and the standing ovation, I said, you know what? This is what I want to do. And this is what I'm going to, and I never looked back. So I was doing that, for forever. Now, wasn't doing that full time. I had a company that, prior to me starting the band, I was working for a company. Did you ever go to a restaurant and on the table, you see the placemat on the table with the advertisements on them?
Sure.
So I worked for a company that went and sold advertisements for those placemats.
I see.
So this really honed my salesmanship,
Good.
in booking gigs too, so booking gigs and everything. So I wound up starting my own company doing that. And I did that for about 8 years. And around 2000 is when I said, that's it. I'm going to do music full time now, because I didn't want to do anything that was taken away from what I was doing. Now, although it was a financial risk, and it's always been a financial risk with jazz.
Being a musician in general, but in a hyper specific realm of it. Yeah. With a limited audience, a large but limited audience.
Yeah. And I had been married. I was married in 1992, and it was like the shortest marriage we had. I was too young and no kids, but it was, that was in 1992. And then I was married again in 1998, and it doesn't bode well for a marriage anyway. It was not a good marriage to begin with. So, but the music and the struggling and all of that did not help matters any. So wound up I just was going forward. I just kept pushing forward. And I think the first year when I started this in 1993, I think we had maybe 1 or 2 gigs. I think my very first gig actually was playing for a lingerie show, a women's lingerie show. I was playing solo piano for all these scantily clad women walking down, which was good, which was great. And they were walking down the runway, and I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool gig. But then I think the second year I got maybe 10 gigs, the third year. So it just kept building upon itself. And I started doing the college circuit, and we started doing colleges and universities. primarily up and down the Eastern Seaboard.
Yeah.
And then came calling the White House was that whole
Now,
thing.
yes, let's go back to 1998. You are minding your own business as a struggling musician, and out of wherever, somewhere in the twilight zone, the eighth dimension, you are contacted by the White House in Washington with a request for you to play there. What
How
talk
that
about
happened?
paranormal events? Fill us in.
I will. And it was funny because I was, it was a Friday night, I think, and it was like, you know what? I was looking at TV and I saw an ad for the White House, and I had wanted to take the group to another level. I thought, I don't want to do the college circuit. I don't want to do just the club circuit the rest of my life. I want to really take this to another level. So I had thought, I contacted the White House. I had called them.
Wow, that's chutzpah.
And I just called them. I said, you know what? I said, I'd like to offer my services for, like performing for the homeless or performing for troops overseas, some kind of positive outreach that we could help with jazz. Because everywhere we would go, what I would be getting from people was, I never really liked jazz, but I like your music. And this is what we still get to this day. And it's because of the way we're presenting it. I think it's the way the music comes across. And keep in mind, I'm doing a lot of my own originals now. I'm doing some Dave Brubeck, but mostly all originals now. And have been my whole career, mostly originals and Dave Brubeck. But people would say, I love your music. So people would start their own jazz band after hearing our group. So it got me thinking, maybe we could take this on a mass scale and try to, enhance the population and try to get jazz back to where it was, back in the heyday. So anyway, they said, well, you might want to talk to the social secretary at the White House. So why don't you send them this? So I said, at the time, it was crazy. I sent them loose press clippings of like a newspaper story that was written, just threw those in an envelope and a CD we had at the time. And that CD, I think, was called Lullaby. And it was from a different group that I have now. So I threw that in the mail, and I'm driving down the road about a week or so later, and I go to and back in the day, remember when you had to pull over to the side and on the payphones on the side of the road, and I was checking, I had to use one of those. I didn't have a cell phone, and I checked my machine, and I got a call from the White House saying, "This is the White House. We would like to invite the Eric Mintel Quartet to the White House for Christmas." And this was for a holiday dinner reception for President Clinton. They said a holiday dinner reception for friends and foes of the president. So it was really cool. And we had to go all through the security background checks and all that kind of stuff. And it was amazing. I mean, we got down to the White House dressed in a tuxedo, because this was something that was going to be really, really high profile.
Yes.
The newspapers got a hold of it. We got a lot of really great publicity out of it, and getting there. And then turns out that at the end, we had brought a saxophone with us because, he plays saxophone.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But he didn't we had it right there ready to go, but he didn't get a chance to play with us because he was in a receiving line all night. I think this was the day after the Monica Lewinsky thing happened, and like a day after he had to bomb somebody or something. He had to give the go ahead. So, but he was grace under pressure that night. It was just unbelievable. So he came in the room. I think the Harlem Boys Choir was on one side. They were great. They were on one side. So what happened is they took us into the diplomatic room, and this is where the president meets all the foreign diplomats from all over the country. So they took us in there. And just to add a movie, I mean, you see Secret Service walking in with the eagle has landed, that kind of thing. And he came into the room. And what struck me the most was how tall he was.
Interesting.
I'm 6 foot. He had a good 2 inches on me.
No kidding. I had no idea.
Very tall. And he came over and I shook his hand and I said, "Mr. President, Eric Mintel," I said, "you and I have a mutual friend in Dave Brubeck." And he said, "I just gave Dave Brubeck the National Medal of the Arts Award." And then after that, he said, Dave said, and for your listeners that would know that tune, Blue Rondo a la Turk, the bridge to Blue Rondo is crazy. But he had said, Dave said I was the only elected official that could sing the bridge to Blue Rondo a la Turk. So it was really cool. And if you ever listen to that tune, it's a crazy tune. But we play it all the time, and it's a lot of fun. But it was surreal, Peter. It was just really a surreal moment. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, this all happened because of one thing. I asked.
That has to be one of the most important lessons in life. Not that you always get the answer that you want,
Right.
but in pursuing a dream, to realize what's the worst thing that can happen. They'll say no.
Yeah.
And you know what? I can deal with that.
Yeah, exactly.
This is, you can coast on that moment for the rest of your life if you wanted to, but in fact, you continued to play, and it was.
And there he is, if you could see that.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
There it is. Yeah. My hair was darker back then.
All of our hair was darker back then. You continued to play, and were you invited to the Kennedy Center between that point and when you played again at the White House, or was that after your second performance there?
No, the Kennedy Center performances were a mystery to me because I didn't ask then to play. So something somewhere along the line, I had gotten a letter in the mail that says that I was chosen to play for at the Millennium Stage at the Kennedy Center. So, and that was, I think that was 1999. So from 1999 to 2005, we had over 10 performances there. And we were actually at the Kennedy Center on September 10th, 2001.
Oh, no.
And we flew out of Washington that day of 2010. I mean, I'm sorry, on the 10th of September of 2001, because we had been doing Jazz in the Terrace with Billy Taylor, and he's another jazz legend, and we played the concert. I came down in the elevator. The elevator door opens up. There's Billy Taylor, and he says to me, "You had a really good set today," and I was like, "It's like being blessed, you know." So, but that was amazing, and of course, we all know what happened the next day on September 11th. And
talk about a high and then a shattering low.
Yeah, exactly.
What timing?
Yeah. So then, so that was then I wound up figuring out how I was able to get down to the Kennedy Center. Really great woman by the name of Tammy Ward. She was phenomenal and really, really loved my group, and we just hit it off, and it was just really great. And she would have me come down and play for like Christmas Eve. The group would come down. It was a lot of travel on my part, just to do that. But I figured, you know what? If they're going to come calling, we're going, You
bet. You bet. The reality of being a performing musician can be rough going. I mean, you're not kind of controlling your diet to a degree. You're not sleeping normal hours. Travel can be less than ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But the love of the work and the process continues on. Who were some of the other people in the music world that you interfaced with during those years?
Wow. Well, it was tough because we were always working. So when everybody's working, you don't really get a chance to meet people. But I'm trying to remember now. There was a bunch of people, but now of course I can't remember. But I remember just Billy Taylor. And of course Marion McPartland.
Oh my gosh.
She was, I mean, here's another thing with Dave Brubeck, and this is how, again, what kind of a great guy he and his wife were. Dave, and so if your listeners are familiar, Marion McPartland was really basically one of the first ladies in jazz, great jazz pianist. And she was English, from England.
Yes.
And her husband, I think, was a cornetist, Jimmy McPartland.
That's right.
So anyway, Marion was at dinner with Dave, and I had just written an article for Downbeat magazine on how to book gigs. It was in the woodshed section of Downbeat magazine, and it said A Jazz Man's Guide to Getting the Gig. And I basically just gave tips on what people could do.
Very practical.
Yeah, the jazz musician, and I don't mean this any disrespect, is just their own worst enemy when it comes to business, to booking gigs. So I was trying to help them along with, booking gigs. So Marion had just seen that article in there, and then Dave Brubeck, Marion, and Dave's wife Iola had dinner, and Dave had mentioned Eric would be a great guy for your show, Piano Jazz. And she's like, oh, I just read an article that he wrote. And you're talking about the struggle, right? So I'm at home and I get a call, and my ex says, Marion McPartland's on the phone. And I picked up the phone, and she goes, are you hiding from those bill collectors too?
I have to say, I was a huge fan of hers, but not until later in life, when she was doing that marvelous weekly radio show, which I never missed.
Yeah.
She was one of the most charming presences on the air, and I was lucky enough to grow up at the end of the golden age of radio, early memories of listening to jazz with my Nana as a little boy, and being introduced to jazz by her. Still some lovely memories. But McPartland, she really was a pioneer and a wonderful, I was going to say magician, and that not
too.
Far from the truth at times, but also very funny, very ironic, and a great radio host as well.
Oh, she was amazing. I mean, and I got a chance to be on her show. We did duos together, and I, of course, it was surreal. That was totally surreal. I get down there and I'm thinking to myself, my God, is this really happening? I'm like, this is a show that I've been wanting to be on for ages. And she's got the who's who of jazz on there.
Yeah.
I mean, these huge names. And
Everybody.
Here I am. Oh my God. And
if you're alive and you're famous, you did her show.
Yeah, it was just unbelievable. So I wound up getting in there, and she put me in a great environment right away, because she used a few expletives, but she was great. She was like one of the guys, she's like, I've got so much effing stuff to do, and but she's like, but I'm glad you're here. So we sat down and we played, and I played Over the Rainbow for her.
Oh.
And she thought that was like the bomb. She thought that was awesome.
Wow.
And she's like, has anyone heard you? And look, Peter, here's the thing. I had never ventured into New York. I really never went to New York to play. Only one time we played at the Catano on Park Avenue in New York, and people loved it. It was great. And I always say we had parking right in front of the Catano that night. How does that happen in New York? But people loved it. And that was really the only time I played in New York per se in a club, because I never pursued that, because it is so congested with musicians. And unfortunately, you're paying to play most of the time.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do that. So it's taken me all over the country. Haven't gotten a chance to get to Europe yet, but all over the country. It's been phenomenal. But yes, so Marion, and so I'll have to send you the link, because it's still on NPR's site, my show. So you'll get a kick out of it.
I would love to hear that.
We played duos together and talked the business of jazz, and it was just a really great environment.
It's also, there's a special thrill to being with somebody who has spent time with the Pantheon, the greats who are beyond legends for, an artist. I remember years ago in Summerstock, when I was working in off-Broadway theater management, I had been assigned to be an assistant director to Bobby Lewis, who, along with Lee Strasberg and Cheryl Crawford, created the group theater. And Bobby had a small part in a 1947 film called Monsieur Verdieu, which starred, in a speaking role, of course, by that time, Charlie Chaplin.
Wow.
And Chaplin had also directed the film.
Oh my God.
And I remember sitting with him, he was 80 at the time, and saying, what was it like to be directed by Charlie Chaplin? And he started talking, and I just went to another place.
Yeah,
But somebody like McPartland, who also, the immortals all pass through that door. And,
absolutely.
by assimilation, by some magic process, just by virtue of contact. Um, I can only remember also that my mother's father, Russian immigrant, as a young man, probably only just in this country, uh, right around the end of the First World War, had walking through Lower Manhattan, came upon a political rally
Mm.
right at the end of the life of Theodore Roosevelt, who, survived an assassination attempt. The Roosevelt, to digress for a moment, there are two museums, one out in Sagamore Hill on Long Island, and the townhouse that he was born in the 1850s in New York. And in the townhouse, as I recall, in a glass case, is his address book, date book, with a bullet halfway through it that was in his breast pocket that
Wow.
stopped him from being
That
assassinated.
saved his life.
Yeah.
Wow.
But after his, talk, just talking really loud, he just walked out into the audience and started shaking hands with people.
Mm.
And Pop would tell me this story a number of times as a little boy,
Mm.
who knew who Theodore Roosevelt was. I was enamored by him because I knew that he was short, he wore glasses, he read a lot of books, and he loved animals. He also loved to kill animals, probably as many as
Yeah,
every other president
that's
combined
true.
and more. But he started a national park system, complex guy. But that thing of shake the hand that shook the hand of Teddy Roosevelt.
Mm.
Anyway, I'm digressing for a moment, but going on to another aspect of contact with a well-known personage. In 2011, as I recall, you returned to the White House, if I'm correct.
We did, and this happened. We had that was in 1998. It was incredible. We had great things, and then 2010. I was also trying to get something going with the United Nations. I wanted to be a goodwill ambassador for
Yeah.
jazz, and I wanted to do something with the UN. And Eric Fault, who was a friend of mine, and we had a correspondence together.
Hmm.
He was the director of UNESCO, and that's their arts organization, part of the UN. And I had said, look, I'd love to. We should do a jazz program. We should do some kind of, jazz, like a jazz day. Well, from our conversations, and I think I had a lot to do with this. They have International Jazz Day now, which is every
Wow.
April 30th every year, and since I think about 2011, which was phenomenal. But 2010 we played for. He was going. I think he was taking a position in France because he was French, so he was going to go to France and work with the UN over there in some capacity. But we got a chance to play at the UN for his outgoing, for a party for him, and that was pretty surreal as well to be in there. And my God, that was a little bit more arduous getting in there than it was the White House. So it was excellent though. But 2011, I'm at lunch. My girlfriend and I are sitting there, and my girlfriend Sherry, and she said, well, you should try the White House again. You should try to call the White House. And I said, no way. I said, that was
Only worked once.
I said, that's only going to work one. I said, that was a one-time thing. There's no way. She's like, oh, give it a shot. Just try it. And what I love about her, she's just very positive and just go for it, So I said, all right. And I still had the phone number in my phone. And I wound up calling the White House. And they remembered who I was and said, what's your availability for December?
Oh,
and this was in October. And they just said, we ask you to keep the publicity quiet until maybe about a week before. I said, no problem. So again, we went down and played for President Obama for a holiday dinner reception. And it was wild because where I was sitting at the piano, this piano at the White House is phenomenal too. It's a very old Steinway, which I have a picture of Dave Brubeck playing that piano for the Johnson administration, which was just surreal, the whole thing. But it's where I was at the piano, I look up on the wall and who's there but Bill Clinton in the big, nice painting picture. But Hillary was in the other room. Her painting was in the other room. So I don't know. But we made a joke of that too. We were like, oh my God. But it was just wild. So we played the party. And again, we get taken down to the diplomatic room. And and this is another thing that's surreal. The Marine Guard is taking you down to this diplomatic room where they meet the president. He does all the photo ops and everything. And we rounded the corner and there he is. And I was like, it was just so surreal, even more surreal than with Clinton, but it was so surreal. And what a great moment. I mean, it was phenomenal. So we went up to them and very cool, just very cool people. And I love those people. And I said, Mr. President, you and I have a mutual friend, Dave Brubeck. And he said again, he goes, well, Dave Brubeck was the very first jazz concert I went to see when I was a kid with my father.
Oh my gosh.
So, and I had given him a CD we had at the time as well. So, and then I feel this slap on my shoulder, and it was my girlfriend getting my attention because the first lady wanted to shake my hand too. So it was a great night. I mean, it was just, the epitome of class. It was just incredible. So that was my White House story, and that was like 11 years ago already.
When you played at the United Nations, do you remember what room or interior? I used to visit fairly regularly. Do you remember where the performance was in the UN?
We were in a private room.
Okay.
And I think it was right across where the General Assembly was, though.
Okay.
Because we wound up getting a picture in the General Assembly room where you see the big podium in the background and you see all the countries represented there. So that was really incredible. I wanted to go up on the podium, but they wouldn't let me. So, but it was great. It was really, really cool.
To our viewers and listeners who tune into this show, more than not for the paranormal and UFO related stuff, we have not forgotten about you. We have another hour to go, but thank you for indulging me and my love of jazz. My introduction to jazz, as I said, was through my Russian Nana, and it was mostly jazz of the 50s, but through listening, I was WNEW was the big jazz station in New York. They didn't have a record player. We would listen to the radio, but it got me more and more interested in the jazz of the 30s and the 20s. And some years back, as a wonderful music show that comes out of Ithaca on Saturday nights, Saturday afternoons, and it's by a host who does a paranormal show on Saturday evenings, my friend Soraya. The show has, I think, the best name of any paranormal show I've ever done. It's called "Where Did the Road Go?" ?
Love it.
He had wanted very much to have Richard Dolan as a guest, and Richard is one of the busiest. Well, I don't know anybody who's busier in the work or more in demand, but we are old friends, and Richard came in for the weekend and we did both shows. But he basically said, if you guys want, I will turn over the music show to you, and you guys can do your own music. And we did a jazz show.
Oh, that's great.
Richard is a big jazz fan, and mostly
beautiful.
He focused in on more contemporary jazz. I would do more period jazz, but we went back and forth song by song, talking about why we loved them as much as we did. Often,
that's awesome.
Well, people that we know in public life, often what we know them for is the tip of the iceberg, and they have, many other interests and passions, and it's kind of delightful to stumble on them, and every once in a while realize, gee, we have that in common as well.
It's amazing.
We've got like 2 minutes or so before break. Any other thoughts on the jazz world, or encouraging younger people who are just not familiar with it, someplace they can start besides Dave Brubeck?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, listen to like John Coltrane, and listen to all those great players. Oscar.
You mentioned
Peterson.
Chuck Corea before, and I remember when
Yeah.
Return to Forever came out. That album had a huge impact on me.
Oh, all those guys, Bill Evans, and I'm talking piano players and things like that, and even Louis Armstrong, and people like that, going back to that day. You have to get a good knowledge of where the music came from, not the history, because we know that the history of jazz, we know it came from the brothels, and we know all that great history. But I'm talking about the history from, say, the 60s onward, and really get a good knowledge of that. But also, like I did, just ask, get mentors, get people that inspire you, listen to them. And, even if they're not here anymore, listen to them and try to be inspired and try to emulate them, not copy them, emulate them, but always put your own voice in there. And like anything else in life, you've just got to ask the questions.
Yeah, you remind me, in my life in the New York art world, I would occasionally hear somebody say, and I still do, I don't like modern art, which is such a sweeping generalization, it takes your breath away. I think for some people, jazz has come to mean shorthand for highbrow, fake sophisticated stuff. Give me a real song that I can hum the tune to and has a real beat.
Well, yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, look, Peter, we're all moving so fast, and jazz is a music that you need to think about.
Yeah.
But when they do, they're immersed in that, and it's a cerebral experience. Yeah. If they would just give it a chance.
Amen. And on that note, we are going to go to break. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. My guest tonight is Eric Mintel. We will return in 4. Take 5.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
It's not just a donation.
It's a warm blanket.
It's a bottle of clean water.
It's a roof and a bed.
It's knowing someone cares.
It's feeling safe.
It's a today that's better than yesterday.
Every dollar you can spare helps so much more than you can imagine. Please, donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Ian. Your support is urgently needed.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
we're back for the second hour of Meanwhile Here on Earth with your host, that's me, Peter Robbins, and my special guest tonight, Eric Mintel. Eric, I guess we do have to talk a little about the paranormal and UFOs and that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You had mentioned that your father, when you were growing up, talked about some of the strange and unusual things that Bucks County was famous for, and Pennsylvania has more than its share of paranormal activity. I know that for a fact. Was there an event or a memory that you associate with your beginning to really have this lifelong interest in the strange, the unusual, and the non-standard?
Well, Peter, there's a memory that I remember, and I don't know if it was a dream or if it was something, but it just has always been with me. And I remember as a young child, I was a latchkey kid, which means that, my mother was working, my father was working when I was younger, and I would often come home by myself, and I would have to be at the house by myself. And but this particular time, it was, I remember this vividly, that I remember looking as a kid, watching my mother and father leave and looking out the window, my dad waving by, and I turned around inside into the apartment that we were in, and I saw this shadow type figure coming down the hallway. And that has stuck with me for years. Now, I don't know if it was a dream or what it could have been, but that really was probably one of the main things that I remember as a child. And that was paranormal, that I could not explain. Was it a babysitter coming down that I didn't know? I don't know. That it's one of those things. But it was just something weird that it was like I just saw the shadow form of this thing.
I didn't ask you in the first hour, but just personal curiosity. At that point in your childhood when you mastered reading, were you much of a reader? And if so, what kind of books did you gravitate toward?
I wasn't really a reader. I was a writer. I was writing my own little stories. I was making up my own little stories. I remember my mom kept these stories. I was tested gifted in kindergarten. But for some odd reason, I could have skipped a grade, but my mother and father did not take that advice and keep going. But I would always be writing, my own little stories when I was a kid. Just this imagination just kept going. And my mom kept those books, but I was never really a reader until later on in life. But my mother was a very voracious reader, loved to read. I mean, she just blows through books like that. And my father wasn't that much of a reader, though, as well.
When at that time in your life, of course, there were a number of really pioneering television programs, Unsolved Mysteries and the like, that focused in on this. And now, of course, are kind of the godfathers and mothers of countless television treatments, and of course, broadcasts like the kind that we do. Were you much of any of those shows stick with you? Or
absolutely. Project UFO. That was back in 1977. I remember Jack Webb. He created the show, and he was like, his narration was, Ezekiel saw the wheel, and this is the wheel he said he saw. So those things just remind me and just stick with me for years. They've just been kind of burned in my memory, so much so that I, for years, and still do, remember the theme song from that show. It's like photographic memory, I guess. It's that I have one of those photographic memories, I guess, at that point. But Project UFO, Unsolved Mysteries, they were phenomenal.
At what point, if at all, did you have, beyond that shadow memory, an experience that, even if it wasn't life-changing, was decidedly paranormal?
Well, I'm going to say in 1997, there's been a couple of different ones, but and after that, but I would say 1997 was the one that really changed my whole perspective on what is going on out there.
How so?
I was going to a gig, and I was driving down this road, and it was January of 1997, so it got dark early. So it was the gig was at 7:00, And I guess this would have been, it gets dark early around 5 o'clock, 5:30, and it must have been around 6. So I'm driving along, going at a pretty good clip down this back road. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, a deer jumps out, and I hit it, and I killed it, and I felt terrible. But what happened was I couldn't do anything. I could not. It was just there, and it was just like one of those things. I just couldn't react quick enough. But when I hit this, I slid like 60 feet along with the deer. We both slid, and the roads were a little wet, so we're sliding, and I slid off to the side of the road. Didn't get into an accident, but was off the side of the road. I get out of my car, shaken up, of course. I get out and I'm looking at this deer, and I'm feeling terrible. I just, killed this deer, and I felt terrible. And out of nowhere, a voice comes out of the woods and says, "How's your hands?" Because I'm a piano player. "How's your hands?" And I was like, and I looked over, and Peter, I kid you not, this woman or whoever it was took this 200-pound deer by its ear and dragged it off the road like it was nothing, and said to me, "You better get off the road." And I got back in my car and I went to the gig. That will never leave me, and that's 100%, 1,000% true. I went back the next day to see if maybe there was a house there. Maybe it was somebody there that was in the woods. There were no houses there.
This was a forested area that you're driving through.
Yeah, forest area. No one's there. No houses, no nothing on either side of the road. And just the spookiest thing possible. And I didn't feel like scared or anything like that. I just was like, why would she say, "How is your hands?" The first thing.
And literally, it's a cold night in.
And when I saw her, she was like, from the car lights, how things are kind of like blurry. She was in the car light, so to speak. So I would see like an outline of this person, but I didn't see a face. I only saw like a silhouette because it was dark. And she said, "You better get off the road." And all in white. I remember she was wearing like white. And I always say that was my guardian angel experience.
Had you stepped out of the car at this point? You were standing outside of the car.
I was outside. That's how I heard her say that.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I was outside of the car, and I'm looking at this poor deer, and I was like, I felt terrible. I'm like, what am I going to do? And that's when I heard it.
I should say here, for anybody that doesn't live or didn't grow up or hasn't spent time in a rural area with a lot of deer, and I am in the center of Deer Central right now. I mean, I see them every day. I think, the only person one of the only people in my family or that I know in this area who has not hit a deer. And I drive more carefully going 2 miles down a country road here to see my ex-brother-in-law than as carefully as I would on West 57th Street when I lived in Manhattan and had access to a car, because it takes a split second and there's almost no way to prepare for when it happens. So that is an awful experience, as I mean, anybody can imagine. And there's such, Bambi and all that stuff.
Yeah, right. It was just a weird night. I wound up going back, and the hood was dented too. My hood got dented because it was, but I told the guys that I was playing with that night, and they were like, "Oh my God." And they just, half-heartedly listened to what I had to say. As it is now with my jazz audience, I'll say, ladies and gentlemen, I've written a new tune, and it kind of goes like this, and they'll half-heartedly listen to what I say, but then I say, but I also have a paranormal TV show. You could hear a pin drop, because people love the paranormal. And everyone has had some kind of an experience.
Yeah. As you were telling this story, my critical thinking, my skepticism, my analytical self clicked right in. I'm saying, what was this woman doing there in the middle of nowhere, literally standing at the scene of what would be an accident? A grown-up deer weighs a good several hundred pounds. I was thinking you were going to say, grabbed it by its
antlers.
Yes, and pulled it off, but by its ear,
It didn't
and
have any antlers. It didn't have any.
nothing
Yeah.
is registering there that, made good sense. It's just that is a truly strange event. Again, it's one thing to, and this is my other producer here, the official, hi, baby, the official cat of Meanwhile Here on Earth.
There you go.
And I don't know if you've ever seen one like this. They're very rare. It is a gray tiger cat. There's only a zillion of them on the planet. Good boy. And it's one thing to have an interest in the subject. It's another thing to decide, I've got a career, but I think I want another one, to run concurrent with it and put together a show I'm going to call Eric Mintel Investigates. How did that come about that you became a show host?
Well, in 2016, I believe it was, I love jazz. Don't get me wrong. I love jazz. The one thing I don't like about it is all the traveling that we have to do and the low pay. That's, if there were better things to jazz than that, I would love it even more. But it's just, I was getting burned out, I think, at that point too. But in 2016, we have a ton of shows on television that are all dealing with the paranormal, Bigfoot, UFOs, everything. And I'm looking at one of the shows on there, and I just said to myself, I could do that. I can do that. I had and then my bass player in my group, Dave Antonow, I didn't realize that we were working together. We've worked together for 22 years now. But back then, we had a little bit of a falling out, but he came back into the group in 2015. And then in 2016, I had said, Dave, you want to do some video? Let's do some paranormal videos together. Let's tell. So at first they were kind of like very tongue in cheek. They were very kind of not telling the stories that we're telling now. And it was, I had always been a filmmaker. That was the other thing. I'd always been a filmmaker, and I loved that medium, and loved editing and everything like that. So that was part of my life, a big part of my life for a long time. And so we started, it was originally called Bucks County Paranormal Investigations. And we would talk about these haunted venues in Bucks County, because we have this great, rich history of stuff from the Revolutionary War.
We're going to say, yes.
Yep. George Washington was all through these parts here. And I live right down from where Washington crossed the Delaware.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So you've got so much. And then we have a lot of ties to the Underground Railroad.
Yes.
So here's this is what I was going to do is, and have done ever since, is told these stories of these venues that people pass by every day that don't realize what kind of great history they have right in their own backyard. And so that's what we've been doing now. Now we've changed it to Eric Mintel Investigates, because we've been going now all over the country, telling stories and focusing on not only ghosts, but UFOs, Bigfoot, dogmen, like you had mentioned before. Also, right prior to me starting this, and I think maybe was the catalyst for this, I had my own UFO experience in 2016, February of 2016.
The same year that you started the show. Let's talk about that experience.
So I guess this was February of 2016. It was still cold, it was still would get dark early. I think, and it's right outside of New Hope, there's an area called Center Bridge. And there's a bridge there that can go over to Stockton, New Jersey, and that goes over to New Jersey. And that crosses the Delaware. It goes over the Delaware. So my girlfriend had a place that she was renting at the time, and we go over the bridge, and as we're driving across the bridge, I look over out of the corner of my eye, I see 5 orange orbs just appear.
What time is it?
8:30 at night.
Oh no, I mean, what time is it that this happened? The time of day.
At night. So it's 8:30 at night. And and it was just like 5 of these orange orbs that looked like swirling lava. It was just bizarre. And so my rational mind, my skeptic, because Peter, here's the other thing. I go into a lot of these with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the ghost situation. I am more skeptical, but I have to tell you that the more we're doing this, the more that we've caught on camera orbs, disembodied voices, all kinds of weird stuff, growls and howls, which I'll tell you about in a minute. It's made me a believer that there's a very thin veil. But I'm looking at these things and I'm saying, well, there's a restaurant nearby. Maybe they're Chinese lanterns. Maybe there's a wedding going on and they just lifted off some Chinese lanterns. I'm thinking maybe that's what it is. So, and that wasn't it, because that restaurant was closed and it was a Wednesday night. And so and I'm fumbling around for my camera phone, I'm trying to get a picture of it. Of course, the flash goes off at the car, so that was no good. But I was able to get one shot. I'll send you the picture of this too. I don't know if I did or not, but I'll send you the picture. But my girlfriend said, well, as she's looking at these, they're doing a little bit. It looked like a search pattern, like one, and then one by one, they just disappeared. They just petered out, and I was able to get one shot of this thing. It was the weirdest thing. I'm still wrapping my head around it, but I don't know what it was. And I mean, John Keel had talked about the living lights, and could this be some kind of a portal type situation? I don't know. But that was my experience. And then probably the catalyst for starting the show. And I think in June of that year, we were very lucky to have a vegan dinner at M. Night Shyamalan's house. He is he's down in Media, Pennsylvania. And a friend of ours won some kind of raffle to have dinner at his house.
Huh.
And it was phenomenal. I'm sitting right next to him at dinner, and we're talking about, he had me play for the guests, and I play piano, and he goes, "Dude, you are awesome." So, and that was amazing too. This was, and that was us right there. Is at M. Night right there. But all of these things, Peter, have led to something. The research has led to something. All of these baby steps, right, have led to these incredible opportunities and experiences. I'm not going to say opportunities; it's more experiences.
Yeah.
So then I started the show in October of 2016.
When investigating the unknown, lifting the veil, if you commit yourself to being a show host, as we know, you are constantly looking for content that is going to engage your audience. And it's not out of the question that there are times that you're thinking, God, what do we do this week?
Yeah.
Other times that you do something that is overwhelming, that you have no real idea of what you're about to get into.
Right.
Do you remember the first time in doing your investigations for your show that you had that feeling of, I am in completely unfamiliar territory. I realize whatever my thoughts are about the phenomena that we think we're engaging, I don't know what's happening here, or I am anxious, or I am doubly curious now because I just don't even have a theoretical explanation for what's going on here. Do you remember a first experience like that?
I remember it well. It was last year. Remember it like it was yesterday. For some of your listeners, I'm sure they are familiar with Dogman sightings and the Dogman sightings that have been happening around this country, which are sort of like it's supposed to be an upright canine werewolf type creature that people are saying that's bipedal, walking on two legs, eating with its hands. It's eating roadkill with its hands. Well, this was an investigation we did last year of what's called the Beast of Bray Road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. And same thing, it's an upright canine. People have been seeing this thing for years, eating roadkill with its hands, standing 6 to 7 feet tall. Very, very fast. When it moves, it's gliding. It's not walking like a regular person would walk. It's almost gliding the way it's walking. The very strange gait. To preface the whole thing, one of our friends and fans of our show approached me and said, we ought to do a video on the Beast of Bray Road. And I said, I would love to do that. And I had heard about it over the years. I wasn't really familiar with it, but I had heard of it over the years. And I said, I would love to do that. I said, the only thing is, how are we going to get out there and who's going to pay for it? And she decided to pay for the whole thing. She paid to have, so I made her the executive producer of the video, and Ellen Collins, and she's just she's our Wisconsin branch team member out there. Ellen Collins, she's phenomenal. So we went out to Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and prior to us going out there, I had seen a show on television. I think it was Paranormal Declassified, and they were doing a segment on a farm of a gentleman named Lee Hampel. And Lee, just looking at Lee, was one of these things that, again, was like, he looked like he was very approachable, looked like a real cool guy. I decided that night after seeing the show, I was going to call him. So I called him, and we had a conversation for 2 hours and about his property and about all of the stuff that's been going on out there. So with Ellen getting this whole thing together, this was December. I think this was December of 2020 that I first talked to Lee. This was now October of 2021 that we actually were in Elkhorn and did the investigation. And it was something that I will never forget, Peter. It was just from the first moment we got there to seeing the evidence that Lee has got, not only on his trail cam, but he's got UFO lights going through the woods. He's got pictures of these weird lights in the field that he's calling portals. They're portal type lights, strange orbs, but he's also got hair samples from this thing that are translucent under the microscope. So it's just bizarre. I could get into the investigation. I didn't know if you had a couple of questions. I just wanted to.
Yeah. My first question is, do you have somebody who you trust to do analysis in such situations, somebody with an accredited scientific background, to analyze organic material that's come in contact with some paranormal source or UFO, whatever, and whether or not you had these samples analyzed in any way?
Well, that was the thing. Ellen has a biology degree, so she had looked at a lot of the evidence that was on the farm, but Lee himself was trying to get it tested. And unfortunately, they wanted a few $1,000s to get it tested, and he wasn't able. He really didn't want to do that. So it's still ongoing as far as that goes.
After the show, remind me, and I'll hook you up with
that'd be great.
A very distinguished source who will look into that for you guys.
That would be phenomenal. That would be excellent. Thank you. And I know Lee's been frustrated about that too, so he'll love to hear that. So Lee showed us, oh my God, he had so many pictures. I mean, thousands of pictures that he showed us that were on his trail cam, on his night vision scopes that he had gotten over the years. He's had all kinds of encounters, I guess, since around 2014. And Lee is the funny thing about Lee is he had no interest in the paranormal whatsoever. He's a math teacher. He was a math teacher from Wakanda, Illinois, 35 years a math teacher. Was always a farmer, but it was always a math teacher. But always wanted to be a hay farmer. And now he's a hay farmer now. But when he got the farm, I think it was his mother's estate, got the farm. His neighbor said, "Oh, Lee, that's where the creature lives, down in that area." And he's like, "What?" And he had his own encounter one night with this thing, with these red glowing eyes that just stayed constant with no light source around, like just looking at it in his direction. It leaped like 50 feet in the air and came back down and took off. So very strange stuff. So those are the stories that we were getting initially. And then all of the other evidence that he has, he's got pictures of this creature on trail cam. It's blurry hair. You could see the hair coming off like a pectoral muscle. Strange orbs in the daytime sky of these round orbs that look like they're coming down. And inside the orb, it looks like it's like a creature in there, like in cross form. Like its arms are out like this and straight here. It looks like a cross. And this comes into play later into our investigation. So we're seeing all this stuff. I mean, our minds were blown. And this is when I looked at this and I said, wow, this is something that we're really getting into. We've stumbled into something here that it was totally out of my wheelhouse. And I know with my paranormal partner now, Dominic, it was totally out of his wheelhouse because he's a spirit medium. And when he goes into those places like the haunted houses and haunted locations, supposed haunted locations, he's going to give us a preview of what we're in store for. I usually get the history and I won't say anything to him until we get to that point and corroborate the evidence. But this particular investigation was totally out of his wheelhouse. So the day of October 3rd, we went down and did some reconnaissance in the area, looking at the field where this creature's been seen. Ellen, it was just the four of us and Lee. Ellen's son, Scott, was on a drone. He was our camera guy and also drone operator. And Dominic Sittel, and Dominic and I have known each other since high school. And has been part of the team now since 2017. And then Ellen Collins. And we're down there doing some reconnaissance in the field. Scott, on his drone, he has to wear virtual reality glasses. Okay. So if this makes sense, he couldn't find us in this particular section of the field where we were. It was called the bait area. And that's where the creature's been seen, in that area. He could not find us. We disappeared off of his screen in that particular part of the field. This plays into it later on in the investigation. Then he finally found us again. We came out of this certain area and he found us again. But for this few seconds, we were not on the screen for a good 30 seconds. So I had made the brilliant idea of saying to Lee, do you think could we bait this area with steak bones? Because we had steak the night before. We kept the bones for bait for the next day. I said, could we put the steak bones down in this area? Maybe that'll draw it in. And he says, that's fine. That's great. So we put the steak bones in the area, and going back to Lee's property to look at more pictures and get more of his presentation before the night investigation. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, was baiting that area a good or bad idea? Because I didn't know what we were in store for. Yeah. To be honest, Peter, this is what I thought. I thought we were just going to hear some great stories. I thought we were going to we're going to do a great documentary, not ever thinking once that I would actually encounter this creature that night.
Yeah.
That's where, and you're saying, did that change my life? Absolutely. It was unbelievable.
When you get involved in that hyper specific area of paranormal investigations around ghosts, spirits, allegations of a presence, life after death, you either come to it, wide-eyed and innocent and develop your own theories and thoughts as you go, or you've done your reading and studied the subject and may have some theories of your own. Have you gotten involved in any, what come under that general umbrella of ghost or spirit investigations, where you have also gotten beyond the intellectual and faced off with a phenomena that was very real in any number of ways for you, or be able to calibrate it, with technological devices or with your own experience, that also left you somewhat changed after the fact?
Yeah, well, going back to this Beast of Bray Road investigation, I mean, the night of the investigation, we were able to capture on video. We had a trifecta of paranormal activity that night. It was unbelievable when I tell you this, and I don't say this lightly. We went out, we thought we were going to actually have to scrub the investigation because it looked like it was going to rain. It was very cloudy, but we got out to the area that we went back to the bait area. We set up shop down there. Now, Scott had a GoPro down into that area, so he would be able to capture on video whatever was there. I had lavalier microphones so we could be close mic'd. And they were just small Cinco microphones, great microphones. So we're sitting there doing the investigation, and we just get down there. Dominic just happens to look up, and it's a clear sky. It was completely clear. He looks up and says, "What the hell is that?" And here, over the field, is a solid orb of light going straight across the field. Now, it wasn't any of the Elon Musk stuff, the Starlink. It wasn't any of those. It wasn't the space station, because we all checked on that later on. And
so it was very high up.
It was high up, but not that high. It was high as I would say, as a commercial plane, like a Cessna would fly in that height range. It's going over the field, solid orb of light, not blinking, but you could see other planes around it blinking. And it was definitely those were definitely planes. This solid orb,
was it close enough to have a shape or any auxiliary color, or it was just
a solid blob, a solid orb, just a solid white orb
moving on a set trajectory?
Yep, just right across the field. But as it did that, it did a 45-degree angle and blinked out. It just winked out like that, just totally shut off. So that was number one. That right there, we were like, what is going on there? So then about 5 minutes later, we hear a howl in the background. And then one's getting closer. The second howl was closer. So Dominic says to Ellen, "Are you hearing this?" And she goes, "Yeah, it's coming from over that way."
Did it sound anything like what you might imagine a coyote or a wolf would sound like, or a different character?
Well, those could have reminded me of a coyote or a wolf, although there's no wolves out there. That was the one takeaway that we found out as well. Definitely was not coyote-like, those sounds, because coyotes have that breaking in of that howl. The third howl, Peter, it was this low guttural yell scream combination, which to me sounded like a man screaming in the field. It was monotone. It didn't.
I was about to say,
it didn't pitch.
Does the skeptic, does the objectivist in you feel there was any chance it was somebody having a little fun with you, so to say?
It did initially, but no, because there was nobody out there. There was the way his property is, it's so vast out there.
Okay.
It goes for miles, and it's completely flat. So that was one of the things too. We were saying, could it have been like a speaker or something out there? But no, it was nothing like that. But it was the same description that an anonymous witness had told me earlier that day, that they had heard this low guttural. He was a state worker for the area, so he couldn't really have his name on the video. But him and his partner got out of the truck, and they heard this scream growl combination, and it was like, for us, it just kept going. It was this long scream, and the beautiful thing with this is we captured it all on our video, and that video is called "The Beast of Bray Road, Alive and Well," because it is. Because we just were like, Lee has a monster on his property. That's no doubt about it. Now, I don't say that just to say it. I say it because we experienced it. It was definitely not a coyote. And Peter, for months afterward, we were like trying to wrap our heads around what it could have been. It was not a coyote. It wasn't wolf. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a fox. It wasn't a screech owl or anything like that. This was just something completely different. And then it got weird. It got very weird very quick after that, because what happened was, all of a sudden we see this mist start coming up from the field. Now, this mist has also been accompanying Dogman sightings, but come to find out later, this mist is also accompanying Bigfoot sightings.
To stop you for one moment here, we're all familiar with ground fogs. I encountered a number of them over the years, especially in research in the UK. And they can be almost theatrical. It's like a cloud on the ground.
Yep.
And if there's a wind, it's moving. What was it that characterized this ground fog that set it aside here, aside from the context of what's happening around it, about how high off the ground was it? Was it like a wall of ground fog or kind of a concentration? How would you characterize it?
I would say it wasn't as high as that. It was very low. It was a low ground fog, but what characterized it was we were getting all these electronic disturbances.
Oh,
Our microphones were cutting out, whereas we didn't have any of that problem before. And we were getting all of this electronic fog. That's basically what was going on. It was like electronic fog. Things were cutting out. And this is what happened. This ties into the end of the story. But you probably have a couple of questions before that, but I don't want to go fast forwarding here. But I'll tell you, so the fog, and you could hear the microphones cutting out. Then we went back to the bait area again, and we were still looking around. Now, Peter, we had no protection. We had a flashlight and a radio. That was it. And that was just my stupidity, again, thinking that we wouldn't see anything. But it was clearly there. Lee offered us a flare gun to take out there if we needed to. I wish I would have taken that. But I have to say this, there was corn in the field. The corn was still up. So this creature had a very ample hiding area to hide in the corn. Because why I say that is because we shined the light right after we heard these. We kept hearing all this rustling going on behind us. Now, there was no wind. It was dead calm, but we're hearing all of this rustling going on behind us. So I shine the light over to where we thought we heard the sound, and then we did see eye shine. And the way we saw this eye shine, it was about 6 or 7 feet up in the air, but it was doing this. It was darting back and forth. It was weird. That was when I said, guys, we need to get out of here. This investigation is, it's great, but your safety is more important. Yeah. And it's telling us to get the hell out of here. Yeah. That's what it was saying. That when that thing screamed like that, it was telling me, this is my area. Get the hell out of here. And that's what we did. We beat feet out of there. So it was, and again, still wrapping our heads around it, because who knew if this thing could have turned on us, what would have happened?
Exactly.
So it was, and we're still, again, wrapping our heads around it. Now, here's the thing. This is why the electronic fog was very much of a player in this whole thing. Lee, the next day, before we went back to Bucks County, Lee sent me a text saying that he has trail cams down there. Oh, by the way, the trail cam shut off at 5:30 that night. And it didn't take another picture until 7:30 this morning. So there's no pictures of us out there. Nothing was recorded. Scott's GoPro, nothing recorded. It was completely blank. Something was...
Obviously, you knew you had fresh batteries. That wasn't the issue.
Wasn't the issue. Just couldn't connect. It just was not connecting. So that footage was blown. Then as we're on the plane, I get back to Philadelphia. I check my phone. Lee sends me he sent me a voicemail that said, I went down to the bait site and the bones are gone. Now, the bones could be gone. Maybe the coyotes took the bones or whatever, but they were gone. And so the entire investigation just left us dumbfounded.
Let's talk about the bones, because I don't remember you mentioning them up until this moment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, earlier in the day of the investigation, we had gone down to do the reconnaissance.
Right.
And in that moment, I had put steak bones in the bait area.
Okay.
And that we had the night before. And I said, Lee, is it okay if I put these bones here? And he said, yes. And that's why I was saying, when I went back to Lee's barn after we put the steak bones there, I was thinking to myself, was putting those there a good or bad idea? Because I think that might have been like the catalyst for all this stuff. Oh my God. So, Peter, it's just like, it was amazing. Here's one other takeaway I'll tell you about, and then we'll go on to another subject if you want. But we did a follow-up investigation of the Beast of Bray Road in April of this year. Now, we didn't encounter it this time. We did a night investigation, did not encounter it. But what we did, the takeaway was we did a town hall meeting, and we had over 140 people show up to tell their story of seeing this creature. And what I got out of this was the way it walks and the strange gait, the way this because all of the descriptions were the same. These people don't know each other, but they're describing the same thing. And it was just amazing.
This is a rural area.
Yep.
Word went out that there was going to be a town hall meeting around this with this host of this paranormal show. 140 people showed up.
Yep.
Interesting. And when you're in a situation like that, it's one regular, decent, hardworking person after another getting up there, giving their account. You know that they wanted to be there enough to share it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not like any one of them got you aside later and said, I'll be interested in telling you more if you give me $100 or something.
Yeah.
Or I'd really like to be on your show, or I'm interested in, writing a book. Nobody, I'm going to make an educated guess, came off like that.
Not at all. These are good people, good, hardworking people, very, very down to earth. And also Lee Hample and his brother Fred, some of the best people that you'll ever meet. I mean, very, very down to earth. And we love Lee, and he gave us full access to the property, both times. And we met some other great people there too, that are just like really very down to earth, and they're as perplexed as we are to what they're seeing. Just to have that and to have that takeaway was amazing. And we did another follow-up video called The Beast of Bray Road, the follow-up. And I did that in 2 parts because we had so much footage. And now your good friend and mine, Tom Carey, and I are working on a dogman sightings out here in Bryn Athyn, Pennsylvania, which is apparently it's been going on for years. And the whole community knows about it. No one has said much about it, but we've got witnesses that have told us their story, told us what happened to them, how it really shook them to their foundation. And we're going to be releasing this video pretty soon, probably next week.
Great. Well, you couldn't be working with a better person. Tom is one of the finest paranormal investigators in the world. And of course, one of the great Roswell specialists in terms of focused investigation.
He's amazing because I didn't realize that Tom is also an anthropologist.
Yes. In fact, I should send you a link. We did an interview on this show months ago, and we ran out of time. We literally ran out of time. He had so much to impart, and living quite a number of lives in the one life that he is living. But yes, I thought that's a wonderful background to have for coming into the world of UFO investigation, but also in paranormal investigation in general. Although he's better known, for his UFO work and the wonderful books that he's written with his major co-author, Don Schmidt, another one of my favorite people in the work. Again, coming back to that general category of ghosts, spirits, presences in the ethereal as opposed to the corporeal world, have you been involved in any investigations that would come under the header of ghost or spirit that also you found yourself getting overwhelmed by what you were encountering, and it wasn't just, a road show citing a lot of interesting details, but no meat, so to say?
Yeah. A lot of times, Peter, we leave with more questions than answers, but on this last investigation and another video that we're going to be releasing that I'm, we're in October, I've got tons of stuff that we're doing this month.
Yeah.
But this video we just did, it's called A Haunting at the Hanoverville Roadhouse. It's a restaurant. It's up in my area in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It's north of where I am. This is probably one of the most compelling and most, I would say, you had just said, what did we stumble into? One of those type of things. The restaurant owner showed me security camera footage of his dining room and what happened next blew us all away. And when you see the video, you will be freaked out. And so this is something that we went into thinking, wow, what are we getting ourselves into? When I went up to the attic of this place, there's a mirror in the attic. Now, Peter, when I go into places like that, whereas Dominic will feel these.
Where is it actually? What is the location? Is it a private home? Is it?
It's a restaurant. It's a restaurant.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's a restaurant. It's a great restaurant.
Old building?
Old building. And come to find out, Tiny Tim used to play there. So he was telling me they had, it used to be a biker bar. They had female mud wrestling in the dining room at one point. But and then Tiny Tim had played there. They had to reinforce the foundation of the dining room because so many people would come to hear Tiny Tim play. But yeah, so it's a restaurant. And when I went up to the attic of the restaurant, it was one of these things where I don't really feel a lot of those energies when we walk into a haunted place, whereas Dominic would feel that. He could tell you right away who's there. But in this particular instance, I did feel like some really weird energy up in the attic. And I felt like the sense of vertigo. If you've ever had that feeling where things are not, just doesn't seem right. Yeah. And there was a mirror up there as well that, again, in the video, when people see the video, I'll send you a link before this, Peter, so you get a free preview of this. But what we caught there, again, very unexplainable. And so to me, this was one that was a little bit more out of our wheelhouse.
Do you have any theories that have kind of grown with you as you've done this work on what phenomena like this really represents? The classic idea of somebody who has passed away, but their spirit lingers, or some variation on that. What is your thinking around this phenomena? Obviously, it's theoretical. I'm more interested in your intuition on these kind of phenomena.
Well, and even as a jazz musician, we're very sensitive to the environment that we're in, right? We're always, as a jazz musician, thinking ahead. I'm thinking ahead to the next melody note, the next chord. So it kind of puts us out of our comfort zone all the time. But I think my theory would be people are more connected to that spirit world than some average people. Is it their antenna is up a little bit more toward that realm, or are these spirits presenting themselves to certain people, whether it's ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot or whatever? So my theory is that there are certain people that are more connected to the spirit world than the average person.
I agree.
And I think it's something that's been with them their whole lives. And that's what I tend to do in our videos, is I'll say to the people that we're working with, is this something that you felt your whole life? Where they could go in. The restaurant owner that we just did this restaurant, he's a contractor. So he's a historical preservation contractor.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So we talked about spiritual connections or object connections to other buildings. He used to be a property manager at a beautiful theater, and he brought some pieces over from the theater. Could those objects have some kind of attachment? I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm much of a believer in that object attachment, but I'm kind of getting to that point. The more research we do and the more things that we've caught on video. And that's the litmus test, is when you're catching this on video. What is that whole thing? We've caught orbs, these disembodied voices where no one's been around. And we don't use those. I have to say, we do not use those spirit boxes, and we don't use REM pods, because those two things give false readings like crazy. Whether you're working with camera equipment, your camera will set that REM pod off down, just around the corner. So
explain what that technology is to folks who are watching or listening who are not familiar with that term.
The REM pod is like anything, a magnetometer. and we tend to use that. But what that is, it's a magnetometer, and what that's doing, it's detecting any electromagnetic energy in that particular area. Say it could be spirit energy, because we all are working on frequency. We're all electric. There's electrical frequencies within us.
That's right.
And these things will also go off with wires, with wires in any building.
Yes.
If all the lights are on, that's why a lot of said they turn the lights off. So all of that, energy is down and it's off. But why this attic in this particular restaurant that we did, there's no wiring, there's nothing up there. And our electromagnetic meter was going off the charts.
Okay.
It was just really crazy energy up there. So, and they had a problem with the mirror. They said someone turned the mirror around. And when they did, they had all kinds of poltergeist activity going on.
Oh my.
But they turned the mirror back and everything was fine. We didn't experience that because we didn't touch the mirror. We said we're not touching the mirror at all. But yeah, so that video will be coming out, and some of the stuff that we caught is pretty compelling.
Eric, you've been doing this show now for 6 years. First of all, tell us, the audience here, where they can tune in and follow you regularly, and shows like the ones we've been talking about, how they can access archived content that you guys have put together.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. They could find us on YouTube at Eric Mintel Investigates.
Okay.
They could find us on Facebook, same name, Eric Mintel Investigates, and they could look me up, Eric Mintel. I post a lot of content on there, like some fun stuff, some jazz stuff, lots of paranormal stuff. So, and you've seen me play some piano stuff that I've done on my page. So it's a nice mix. And also on Instagram, it's Eric Mintel Investigates.
Great.
And
so people can get directly in touch with you
if
they have a question or a story or something that might even result in a program.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be absolutely incredible. And that's what we do. A lot of people are contacting us for these videos that we're doing. I call it paranormal tourism, because we're showing people where to go, what to do, and showcasing these beautiful venues. And again, all this great history that people have in their own backyards, that a lot of people are clueless to what they have. And so that's what we're doing. We're telling those stories. And then also they could find me, like I said, on YouTube. There was one other thing if they have a smart television, they can add Central New Jersey Network to their channel, and they could see me Saturday nights at 11 o'clock on Central New Jersey Network. And then in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, I'm on cable station up there in about 80,000 homes on Service Electric TV 2. But working on trying to get a TV show, please. So we're talking with Travel Channel and trying to get some things going. But Peter, I think you, me, Richard Dolan, we need to, and I'm going to be interviewing Ralph Blumenthal soon. I think all four of us should go on the speaker circuit, and let's do it. We could have jazz and paranormal.
Ralph is another person who did an absolutely remarkable interview conversation a couple of months ago. We are out of time. And Eric, I want to thank you so much for sharing all this with us. You and I will, of course, remain in touch. To the audience here, you now know where you can contact Eric. You can find his music online. And all I can say is join us next week. Stay well. Stand up and fight for what you believe in, and be kind to each other. Next week.